We begin today, chapter 16. Chapter 16 in one word, tfuna. Tfuna, which means intellectual. Let's speak about an intellectual love, which sounds paradoxical. Love is in the heart. Intellect is in the mind. What do you mean an intellectual love? Even the words an understanding heart. What do you mean an understanding heart? The heart is about feelings. Understanding is intelligence. Now, of course, there's a relationship between intelligence and the heart because we will see in a moment, quite clearly, we hopefully experience that. Okay, what is the important principle about the service of the Beinoni? Remember, the Beinoni, the individual who has mastery, self-mastery, over themselves and their behavior, which means actions, speech, and meditated willful thought. So it's about being able to have the divine light of our soul, which is in the brain, in its first manifestation, it's in the brain, to rule over the urges of the heart that are self-directed, that are about just fulfilling, my pleasures. Forget about evil of the heart. That are negative things. Even if it's just self-directed pleasures. That's what we're talking about. Because that's not serving. That's called self-serving. When we fulfill the pleasures of our heart, that's self-serving. When we fulfill what we were created for, what God needs us for, which is the divine light in our soul, that it has the dominion over the desires of the heart, and whatever that may be. We're not defining that in the moment. Of course, it's through Torah and mitzvahs, through doing a mitzvah. So then, we are serving God rather than self-serving. Now, how do we rule that? How do we do that? So we've spoken about, but it's about an understanding of the mind that feeds the heart, right? What we understand becomes ultimately feelings that we have in the heart. So if we understand the greatness of God, we understand our relationship with God, we understand the greatness of a mitzvah, like studying Tanya, giving charity, and so on, right? So if you understand the greatness of God, so it'll bring to two basic feelings. Fear of God, which fear doesn't mean fear of punishment, but means fear of, we'll learn more later, the presence of God, the realness of God. So that will lead us to turn away from negativity, turn away from self-directed behavior that is just, seeking pleasure for oneself. It'll remove yourself from that, right? And also bring you to a love of God, that you're going to have a longing, a desire that you want to connect to God, right? So the normal human way, or I take that back. I don't know, call that the normal human way, but what we've learned till now about the Beinoni is the capability of the mind to inspire the heart. What is the job of the mind? Is to have clarity, to have an understanding that you connect to in your heart, that now your heart has real feelings towards the Almighty, real feelings of, as we've explained before, of love and awe, love and fear towards God. What happens if you're not capable of having palpable feelings towards God? That's what we've been speaking till now. Truth be said, speak about myself, but I probably speak for everybody here too. We're rarely going to have that. So are we like off the mark? Are we incapable? We can't, how often do we excite our heart to really feeling a love towards God? It happens, from time to time, but the Beinoni is constantly able to do that. So if the heartfelt feelings aren't there, what are we left with? That's what this chapter is going to teach us. An amazing idea. And that is another important principle about the Beinoni. Even if one's intellect and understanding is incapable, again the word incapable, of producing a revealed love of God in your heart, which means a fiery flame, that you have a passion, that, like you have towards a loved one. Yeah, to your child, you have this exuberance that you just want to give them a hug, to your spouse, and so on, right? All you have, though, is a love that's hidden in the mind and in the recess of the heart. So what does that mean? It means that the heart comprehends the Chabad, the wisdom, the understanding, the knowledge that the intelligence of the mind has. But instead of getting excited about it, the heart is merely an understanding heart. Meaning the greatness of God, God's infinite capabilities, His infinite being, that we are incapable, again, of getting excited about. All it leads me is to know that it's fitting for me that I should pine for Him, that I should cleave to Him. I know, I don't feel. In other words, I don't have a fiery passion over here. I have what's called an intellectual love, right? And that intellectual love, it's in the mind, has an understanding, and has an intellectual love that leads to an understanding heart. And hence, I don't have a fiery passion, but it leads me to do another mitzvah. That contemplation, that thought process leads me now to give more charity, to learn more Torah, to love another with greater depth. That's what it leads me to. In other words, through this, you're embracing God, His mitzvah, the King. All the mind lets you to is to resolve that it's fitting and it's proper that I should embrace God with my heart, soul, and might through the study of Torah and the doing of a mitzvah. And in practice, that leads me to do another mitzvah. Wow. The Alter Rebbe says, you have accomplished the goal. Because the goal is not feelings towards God in the heart. What's the goal? It's behavior. That the behavior from that feeling in the heart leads me to another mitzvah, leads me to study Torah. Now, when you have you're pining to connect to God, you're feeling that you're in a barren desert, right? And you need to connect. And you have this passionate feeling. And then it leads you to study Torah, to give tzedakah, charity, to whatever mitzvah, to pray. Of course, you're going to do it with great fervor. No doubt about it. It will lead you to do it with great fervor. But if you don't have that, again, very palpable feeling in your heart, but it still leads you to doing the mitzvah, well, ultimately, that's the point. The point isn't about feelings. The point is about the mitzvah that comes out. The action, the behavior. Action, speech, thought, it's all behavior in Jewish teachings. And that's what's important. So even though it's an intellectual emotion, and you can't properly call it love and fear of God, that you're not sensing the awesomeness of God, you're not feeling this desire to attach to God through love, right? But it has led you to do this mitzvah. So now this mitzvah has wings. It's going to fly. It's going to soar. And the Alter Rebbe says, this is in the same ways if you practice it with real love and fear in the revealed heart. Wow. Wow. It's the same thing. And again, I want to emphasize, because ultimately, and this is perhaps the, a novel idea, because, Western civilization, it's about feelings, right? And therefore, the feelings is the end result, that I have this feeling towards. And in Judaism, it's not. It's about our behavior. So the feelings are only a means to that end. Therefore, if you have that end, then amazing. And therefore, the fact that you've, thought about and you tried to produce a feeling, but all you got was an intellectual emotion, an understanding heart, that led you to not be preoccupied with yourself and just seeking your own pleasure, your own physical needs, or even spiritual needs, but, your own needs, and occupied with God's needs, his mitzvah, whatever it might be. Powerful. I know now that. Who can share with me? From the first part of chapter 16. I know now that. I know now that we're still in the ball game. Because really, if we're honest with ourselves, how often do I pray and I have a palpable feeling of love of God in my heart? Palpable? How often do I have that? But if I thought about God, thought about his greatness, thought about his realness, and that now gave me an intellectual love, that's powerful. Okay. David says, I know now that Abinadi is constantly creating an excitement towards Hashem through the intellect as opposed to us, which we are aiming to achieve ultimately to be excited to Hashem through wanting to do a mitzvah. Okay. That needs to be modified a bit, but very good. But I know now that my feelings should lead to actions. Exactly. Linda asked a question, should there be any fear of God? I thought that is a non-Jewish emotion. No, it's not. Not fear of punishment. That's not the Hasidic idea, even though there is an idea of that in Judaism. But that's not Tanya. That's the child's version. This is adult studies. The child's version is, and some of us are maybe really children, because a child is really concerned with themselves, right? They're concerned with themselves. So when they get a punishment, they're concerned about the punishment that they may get, but that is self-concerned, right? on this level, it's not about self-concern, so therefore fear, as mentioned, is about the presence of God. Just like when, we'll learn at great length later, chapter 41, but just like when someone is in the room, we act differently, especially if someone is special to us, they're in the room, someone who we really admire and respect, we act differently than no one's in the room. That's called fear. Because of the presence, I'm acting differently. Well, that means I fear the way they're going to either think about me, right? That's not love, right? Fear is like, let me check. That's not out of love. I do, check to make sure my jacket's straight, and someone just walked in, and I want to make sure, that they think favorably of me, right? So that could also be fear of punishment, because I'm afraid that they're going to say some nasty thing to me because, my lapel is off and my tie is off. And that's true. That's the child's way. But then there's just the very fact of presence, and you want to be appropriate. You want to be appropriate. Not fear that the person's going to say something nasty to you. You want to be appropriate, so therefore, all right? Okay, I hope that was clear. Andrew, Torah says that you should love God with all your heart, and so are we not commanded to experience the love of God in our hearts? Excellent question. Actually, the mitzvah is, how could you be commanded to love God? You can't. It's a feeling. Either you got it or you don't. So the love is Shema Yisrael. Hear, Yisrael. Yidden, listen. In other words, understand the greatness of God, your relationship to God, the presence of God, and so on. And that will bring you then to a feeling in the heart. And if not, that's the novel teaching here in this chapter, is that even if you have only an intellectual love, merely an understanding heart, not a palpable feeling, you've accomplished the same thing, because the goal is, and we'll get more into it. Eugenia says, I know now that the ultimate goal of intellectual avoda is proper actions rather than feelings. Excellent. Cindy, I know now that when the heart has passionate feelings for God, real feelings, it will lead us to do another mitzvah. Exactly. Very good. John, I know that if my love of God ebbs, the divine soul in my brain will be able to control my Yetzer Hara. Very good. Adelia. Ideal. I think it's ideal. I think. I know now that if you have an intellectual love of God and do the mitzvah, that you will feel the love and fear in the revealed heart. That's the whole point we're saying here, is that you might not. No, you won't. That's the whole novelty. And so maybe we won't. And it's still amazing. And it's still, in a sense, the same thing, no difference. Denise, I know that if I feel good about ourselves in doing a mitzvah that leads us to do another mitzvah, is that still self-directed. It's not about feeling good about yourself. Not about feeling bad about yourself. But that's not the point about feeling good about yourself. It's about an awareness of God that our minds engage in, that leads me to act differently. That's the basic point. Clem, I know now that it's important to learn how to form the mitzvah in the heart and the soul instead of an emotional excitement or reward. Okay, very good. Hannah, I know now that the goal is not about my feelings towards love of God, but through my behavior, actions, and doing another mitzvah. Okay, excellent. Okay, okay, very good. All right, John, I'm not exactly, But isn't some fear a part of being humble enough to know that we are not in charge? Absolutely. Absolutely. Linda, yes, I agree. That's why we need to have the synagogues back and running. Excellent. Okay. We continue in chapter 6.